So for those of you that are joining us today, just wanted to kind of let you all know that we've had a couple of last minute changes. So you're going to have 5 wonderful presentations today. Well, 4 wonderful presentations, and I'll be filling in. I'll let you decide if that's going to be wonderful or not. So hopefully if you tuned in for a specific presentation, it's still occurring today. So Maria, should we get rolling?
We shall. Good morning, everyone. It's so lovely to look through the chat box and see all of the different places that we're coming from this morning. I am very, very honored to be serving as the CCGG president. My name is Maria Claver. I'm a professor in gerontology at California State University, Long Beach. And I just wanted to welcome everyone and give you a little bit of a reminder of who we are as CCGG and invite you to join us if you're not already a member. I'm going to put in the chat box our vision and our mission statements. So with a vision of cultivating a state that celebrates the value of every older Californian, our mission is to promote quality of life of our diverse aging population through leadership and by fostering statewide collaborations among educational programs, providers, practitioners, and public policy advocates in the field of aging. We really have 3 pillars. So the networking, education, and advocacy are what we really focus on. And I feel like these events do all 3 of those. So please take the time to chat with each other in the chat boxes as the presentations are going, because as we get to know each other, we become even stronger as a force to be reckoned with for the good of older adults and their families. Congratulations to all of those of you presenting today, and a special thank you to the committee that put this event together, Donna, Emiko, Mary. You are so appreciated, and you'll find out a little bit more about our next event at the end of these presentations. Lastly, I just wanted to ask all of the board members to put a little, I don't know, they call it reaction thing, maybe a heart or the little woo-woo thing, just to let everybody on the call know who our board members are. So you're seeing some of the hearts popping up. So these are the amazing people that are serving on the board. Oh, John is giving himself a round of applause. Awesome. So these are the fabulous folks that work on the board. We're always looking for people interested in becoming board members. So think about it. Students, practitioners, educators alike. With that, I will go ahead and hand it back over to Donna and have a great session today. I'm really looking forward to learning. Thank you.
You're on mute, Donna.
Of course. CCGG is a great way to connect with gerontologists around the state, whether it's practitioners, people in agencies, educators, students. So highly encourage you to check it out. So I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Emiko. You're going to be our mistress of ceremonies today. I don't know if that's the right term. She's going to take us through the day.
Just wanted to give you, how the session is structured. So we have 5 presentations, and each presentation session has about 20 minutes. So we've asked each presenter to have about 12 minutes of presentation, followed by Q&A, and then that includes transition to the next presenter. So we'll watch the clock, and then, we might have to ask the people to wrap up a little and then move on to the next one, so that everybody has enough time, for each topic to be discussed. For Q&A, you can either raise your hand or write your question in the chat. So we'll make sure to go to those questions in the order that appears. And then we'll have, after that, just a little surprise to presenters maybe, but no, we have a Best in Showcase Award calling. So Dr. Donna Jenkins kindly contributed gift for this award. So beside Donna, 4 other presenters will be listed in the poll. So at the end of the presentation session, that we have a little Zoom polling. So just keep in mind that which one it was your favorite. We don't have a really official criteria about to assess which one is better and not, but just pick your favorite one, and then we'll just wrap up the presentation sessions. And then we'll just leave the 11 to 11:30 a.m. Whoever wants to stay longer to the informal networking. So if you like, you can hang around, after the official 2-hour presentation session, the event as well. All right. With that, I think we can go ahead and move to the first presenters.
Yes. So I'll be announcing each presentation today, and I'll be trying to kind of make sure everybody's staying on schedule. So if I jump in and say that you're running out of time, it's just me trying to keep us on track. So I'll be watching the clock for everybody. So our first presentation today is from Dr. Jaylina Shaw, and it's Less is More: The Importance of Deep Prescribing for Older Adults, which I'm really excited for this topic because I actually have a speaker tonight in my class about polypharmacy. So I'm really excited to hear about this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let me get my little presentation up here. Ooh, that wasn't the right screen. Sorry, guys. I have some technological different. I'm Indian and I feel like I should know these things, and I'm very bad sometimes. So just bear with me here really quick. There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Jaylina Shaw. I am a clinical pharmacist and a chronic disease specialist. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is just as important as your morning caffeine dose. If you've not had it, it's 9 o'clock, it's time. But we're going to be talking about deprescribing. And some of you are probably like, what the heck is deprescribing? Well, don't worry. I'm here to break it down for you and explain why it's essential in order to optimize a medication therapy in older adults. So a little bit more about me really quick. Again, my name is Dr. Jaylina Shaw. I have a doctorate in pharmacy. I have been in healthcare for 15 years, so a long time. I carry multiple board certifications, including that in pharmacotherapy, in ambulatory care. I have special licensure here in the state of California as an advanced practice pharmacist. I also have certification in medication therapy management, and I've been doing that work for over a decade. But more importantly, I've actually helped hundreds of people take less medications, lose weight, reverse their chronic diseases, and just feel healthier overall. So a little background, chronic diseases are any of these things listed here. These are just a few of them, anything from stroke to heart attacks, diabetes, lung disease, Alzheimer's disease, kidney disease, cancers. All of these are chronic diseases, and they're usually managed by medications. And the prevalence of chronic disease is really high, especially in the US. 6 out of 10 people have at least one chronic disease, and 4 out of 10 people have 2 or more chronic diseases. And essentially what this means is the more chronic diseases you have, the more likely it is that you're going to need multiple medications. So polypharmacy is the use of multiple medications. And this can be really common in our older adult patients because a lot of them have chronic disease. So while medications can be very beneficial in managing health conditions, they can also increase the risk of adverse drug events. Things like there's an increase of falls, there's an increase of like dizziness, or maybe we're fainting because our blood sugars are too low due to our medications. There's also issues with like drug interactions, like by taking multiple medications, there's more of a risk that the 2 drugs that we're taking can interact with each other, or even foods, or like grapefruit juice sometimes can affect certain medications. And the problem with this is that it can lead to things like hospitalizations, disabilities, and it decreases the quality of life for someone. On top of that, sometimes what happens is a patient may be originally prescribed a medication for a condition. and then they're having a side effect, like let's say nausea. So they come back to the doctor and are like, oh, well, I'm having nausea from this medication. So then the doctor then prescribes an additional medication to take care of the nausea. So now you're on not just the first medication to take care of the condition, now you're on medications to take care of the side effects from the first medication. So now you're like not on one medication, but two. And this happens quite frequently. So that's where deprescribing comes in. It's kind of like Marie Kondoing your medication regimen. So for you, those of you who don't know who Marie Kondo is, she has a belief of decluttering your life by figuring out what sparks you joy. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be eliminating medications based on if they bring you joy. Okay, not necessarily. More like we're going to be eliminating medications if they are not necessary. And we want to do this in order to simplify our lives, improve our health, and just our overall quality of life. So today, I really want to show you some evidence-based benefits of deprescribing, address the challenges, any misconceptions around them, and explain how deprescribing can be a part of our everyday practice to help our older adult patients, clients, and friends. So, what are the benefits of deprescribing? There are a ton. So first off, we want to reduce the risk of these adverse drug events that I was talking about. Things like sometimes some medications make it more likely for people to fall, for them not to be able to feel like they can think as clearly, or like when sometimes someone accidentally takes all their nighttime medications in the morning and then they're dozing off like halfway through the day. And believe it or not, this actually happens quite often. I used to work at a call center pharmacy, and my primary job was to answer the phone and answer questions about drugs. And this happened so much where patients would be calling in asking about side effects, or they accidentally took something, or trying to figure out whether or not they were supposed to take, a medication on an empty stomach or not. And less medications means there's less potential for these types of mishaps to occur. Also, as we age, our bodies shift and change. So we metabolize drugs differently. Some of them we metabolize slower, some of them quicker. And we also, the more medications we have, the more drug interactions we have. So when we metabolize our drugs differently as we age, it makes us more vulnerable to side effects. So less medications means less side effects and less chances for drug interactions. Plus, we'll increase our medication adherence, meaning it'll be so much easier to stick to a regimen because it's simplified, it's not so confusing, and we don't feel like our own personal pharmacy. So it reduces pill burden, medication-related stress for older adults. Again, I did a lot of what's called medication therapy management for patients. And what they would do is they'd come in and they'd have at least, some of them, a dozen or more, sometimes upwards of 20 medications. And the problem with this is it becomes then a delicate balance between when to take your medications, because some of them have to be taken first thing in the morning versus the nighttime. So timing's important. Empty stomach versus with food, or some of them have to be separated. For example, we would have to make sure a client that's on a thyroid medication was taking it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, and it was at least 4 hours before they took their multivitamin or a calcium supplement or an iron supplement, so that those drugs didn't interact. So this can get very confusing. It can cause a lot of stress. And lastly, we want to save some money. Less medications means less cost to the patient and also less cost to our healthcare system, because then we don't have patients calling in, or scheduling doctor's appointments, coming in for emergency room visits because they fell, stuff like that. So, of course, nothing in life is easy, and deprescribing also comes with its own challenges. So first off, the problem is that there are no standardized guidelines for deprescribing. So it's kind of like the Wild West out there, unlike prescribing, which is very detailed, right? Like people with diabetes, they come in, they get their labs done based on their lab range. The doctor is like, I'm going to prescribe this medication. And if they've got kidney disease, if they've got heart failure, then we're going to look at these subsets of medications. That is not the case with deprescribing. And the challenge too with deprescribing is sometimes when we remove medications, our bodies have become accustomed to having a medication in our system. And so we may experience withdrawal effects on top of, but don't worry about that too. It's like, as far as the deprescribing goes, this is why you want to get your local pharmacist involved, talk to your healthcare providers. This is a great time to have those people involved because we can consider each patient's unique set of circumstances and help them through the process. On top of that, we've got to worry about patient resistance because let's face it, change is hard. And older adults sometimes will have a fear that their condition is going to come back. So an example of this is when someone's put on something like a benzodiazepine, which is like Xanax or Valium, it may be initially prescribed for a short amount of time, but then, things happen and we forget to get the patient off of it. So they've now been on it for years. So what this looks like is they'll come into the doctor's office years later saying, my memory, it's not as good as it used to be. And I can't think as clearly as I used to. And because the way these medications work, especially in older adults, it's kind of like a dimmer switch. So the change is so gradual, they don't make an association that it's these medications that are causing the memory loss or their ability to not think so clearly. And so the doctor may say, well, it's time to get off of this Xanax. And the patient's like, whoa, no, you're not taking that away because I need that. So I'm not anxious. So this is also where it's really important to have someone like a pharmacist or a doctor involved because we can help our patients and our clients make more informed, educated decisions when it comes around their medication management. We also have provider resistance. Providers sometimes, for the reason that they're worried about the backlash from patients, so they sometimes are fearful about initiating a conversation around this. But, that's something that we as healthcare providers are working on. And lastly, deprescribing sometimes does require some ongoing monitoring and assessment because we have to make sure that the patient's regimen remains effective and appropriate. And this sometimes can be super time consuming, and it may require additional resources and a lot of coordinations amongst healthcare providers. So what's the bottom line? What are the implications of deprescribing? Well, for healthcare providers, deprescribing can enhance the quality of care because better medication regimens mean a better quality of care. And it really promotes a patient-centered care, which is what we want. We want our patient to be at the center of their care so that they are receiving appropriate treatments. And lastly, it makes the healthcare delivery system more efficient and effective because we are no longer spending time trying to help people who are, having side effects from medications. They're needing less doctor visits. They're not coming in for emergency room visits as frequently. For a patient, it really can improve their quality of life because their medication burden has been decreased. And it can decrease the risk of these adverse drug events that I was talking about, like falling or not being able to think clearly. And it really empowers a patient to take an active role in their health care. So in conclusion, deprescribing is a vital component of medication management, especially in our older adults. And like the KonMari method, the Marie Kondo method I was talking about earlier, we want to keep only what brings you joy, or actually in our case, health benefits, and discard the rest. So yes, there are challenges, but we've totally got this. And we can work together to optimize medication therapy and especially for our older adults, patients, and clients. So I just want to take this time to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak on this really important topic. And remember that less can be more, especially when it comes to medication regimens, and reach out to your local pharmacist or other healthcare providers to help simplify your medication regimens and improve your health, your quality of life. If you have any questions or you just want to learn more, feel free. There's a QR code. My links are there. I love talking about this stuff, so feel free to reach out and you know, if you have any questions at this time, I would love to take them.
Dr. Shaw, I do have a question actually.
Yeah.
So let's say that they're like my grandmother, I go over to her house and I notice, oh my gosh, her medicine cabinet is full of medications. So, what would be the first step in trying to assist her? Would it be to the local pharmacist, or would it be to her primary care physician? Because my grandma has a lot of different specialists as well.
Yes. Yeah. That's why this deprescribing can get real messy very quickly. So that's such a great question. The first thing I would do is I would get, and this has happened to me at the pharmacy as well. You just take all those meds, you put them in a grocery bag, and you just walk down to the local pharmacy. And yeah, you can do that with the pharmacist. The other option is, especially with older adults, many of them are on Medicare, and their Medicare pays for these medication therapy management appointments with a pharmacist. So what's great about that is it is the pharmacist's job then to very clearly go through and look at every medication, its use, and all of that. And what's great is at the end of that, it's required by the center by Medicare to send out a letter that details every medication, how to take it, and what it's for. And so that's the first step I would take. It's just, first, there's two things you can do. One, you can just take all the meds, put them in a grocery bag, walk to the local pharmacist. Or two, you can find out from, if she's got Medicare, like who she's with, if they will do a medication therapy management, because it's a part of their plan. So, and they can do that over the phone. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I see Tara put her hand, Tara put her hand up. Sorry, Tara.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this presentation. As a care manager who is not meant to have any kind of medical recommendations, but I am sort of the hub of the wheel, right? Making sure the left hand talks to the right hand. Sometimes I'll be filling medisets with the permission of the client. Is there a gerontology or geriatric care manager course like Pharmacy 101 that might be helpful for us, besides just Googling and learning? What can gerontologists do to be able to help ask the right questions of our clients and their doctors and their care partners, et cetera?
Ooh, that is such a great question. You know, I think the biggest thing is especially like, it's so great to have people like you in this field, because we do need advocates for people because this can get really confusing. And I wish that there was a great resource out there where I'd be like, yeah, you just need to tap into this, and there's, but the best resource you're going to have is the pharmacist. And I know I'm going hard on pushing on the pharmacist field, but we are very accessible healthcare providers. A lot of people don't utilize pharmacists to the extent of which they could be utilized, because here's the thing. You don't have to call your primary care physician, wait on the phone for like forever to try to get a hold of somebody. Like, you have someone that spent 4 years getting a doctorate, at your local grocery store. So I think the best thing to do is, if you're going to do some research on your own, that's fine, but then take the research to the local pharmacist, or try to schedule an appointment with the pharmacist if they're busy. And the reason I advocate for that is because as a pharmacist, I kind of look at myself as like an art curator these days, especially with the amount of information that's available out on the internet. So like an art curator decides what gets to be put on the wall art-wise. I would want my patients to come in with me so that I can help them discern what is misinformation versus information. So if you come to me and you're like, look, I did this research, this is what I found, then I can say to you, you know what, this resource isn't that great. Here's what's actually going on if you're going to do any research for yourself. So I don't know if that really answered your question.
Absolutely. I mean, my sister's a pharmacist too, so she's a good go-to. But it would be, I think there's a real opportunity for someone to, although there's probably legal and liability issues as well, but just to talk about the categories of geriatric care meds and the effects. So that might be an interesting thing to another topic for you at some later date for CCGG.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially because older adults do metabolize drugs differently. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I saw Lorinda. I think she's giving us some good information here related to what you were just asking, Tara. Oh, you're on
Thanks,
mute.
Lorinda. Thank you.
Yeah, that was kind of an afterthought. I think at most community colleges where they have a chemical dependency program, you can find at least an intro pharmacology and physiology course that can give you some background, on absorption and that sort of thing. This is just a course description from American River College. It's taught on campus, so it doesn't help you, right? Some colleges might have it fully online. But it was interesting that you were the first to present, Josina, because last night I was talking to some friends. Wherever I go, older people start talking to me about their relatives and their family, and it was a circumstance that I'd had experience with before, and it made me wonder how consumers can be aware of this problem. So there was an older person with dementia, and they gave them the combination of Aricept and Namenda, and now the person has aphasia and speech problems, because that is a known drug interaction with a permanent, once you take them away and you stop using them, they still have the side effects are permanent. They're cognitively compromised. But I've never been able to see, looking at medications where there's kind of something to highlight that. I mean, that family should have had to sign something saying this medication can give you permanent impairment, right? Because now they're rethinking that combination. They're going to take it away and do something different as they experiment with, each living being who's got dementia is an experiment. So is there a place in those papers where that kind of an interaction is highlighted so people know?
Here's the thing. When you go into the pharmacy to pick up the prescription, usually it's required by law that they come and talk to you. As a pharmacist that's worked in like both retail and in a clinical setting. So retail is like going to Walgreens or, the grocery store. When we are giving someone a medication, it does the system flags, and we have to override it as the pharmacist. We have to look at it, and the system flags you saying, listen, this is an interaction. And it is our responsibility as the clinician to let you know that, listen, this is a possible interaction. And sometimes we don't even bother letting you know because we call the doctor, because we're like, yeah, we don't want this person on this med combination. As a pharmacist, that is part of our responsibility. Now, I'm not going to make excuses, but sometimes in certain settings, as we can know with healthcare, especially in the US, it is, we don't have a lot of time. And so sometimes things may not be communicated as well as they should be. And things are sometimes overlooked, or maybe it doesn't happen all that often. And so they're like, oh, well, this is kind of rare, so I'm not even going to really, bring this up. Or maybe someone comes to the pharmacy to pick up their meds and then they decline the consultation. And so it could be a bunch of things. It's just the way the system's fine. And I know it is really aggravating, especially because we, as the patient, we don't know. We're like, the doctor told us to take this med. We're assuming they know it's safe. And then we're taking it. And then we're finding that, like, wait a minute, like something's wrong here. And I agree. This is a gap in the therapy, it's supposed to be taken care of by the pharmacist letting, somebody know. The systems also, like in clinical systems, the doctor should also be alerted because these things are put into the computer systems.
Yeah.
But it's also you want to make sure your healthcare provider, and look, they may make mistakes, but you want to make sure your healthcare provider is paying attention. So I will say, because this also then puts a lot of responsibility on someone else, to take some personal time to actually ask hey, I'm starting this new medication. Can you please make sure this isn't interacting, or let me know what the side effects are on top of that? So that way it puts you can take some ownership in your health, because I don't like leaving people with tips where they're like, well, I just have to wait for the front. No, you can just go and ask them, and just let them know, like, hey, can you just double check and make sure this isn't going to interact with anything? And as a pharmacist, I'm like, sure, no problem. Like, yeah, you're good here. This is fine. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shaw. We're going to move on so we can get to our next presentation. These were wonderful questions. I think that everyone really had a lot of good things to ask about. So that was great. So we might have a little bit of time at the end as well. So we're going to move on to Donna Jensen, who you all heard from before, and I'll let her introduce the title of her presentation. I don't know if you're on mute.
Of course I am. Hi. Sorry about that. So I'm going to be speaking about some research that I've been doing on disaster response for older adults, and specifically focused on the Camp Fire, which was a huge fire up in Northern California in Butte County that has the untenable reputation, or I guess data of being the most deadly wildland fire in the state. And so I'm going to talk about the Camp Fire and some research that I'm doing now with that. So first off, I just wanted to kind of get everybody a heads up, because we are going to be talking about some pretty heavy stuff. Going to be seeing some images, nothing too gruesome, but images of devastation. And obviously, with all of us in California, I'm willing to guess that a lot of our lives have been impacted in one way or another from wildland fires. Just wanted to take this moment here just to kind of pause, because there were 86 official deaths, and I'll talk about maybe why those rates might be higher. But just to all those folks who lost their lives, lost their homes in this devastating wildfire. A little bit of self-disclosure. I lived and worked in Butte County and Paradise and Magalia for over 30 years. So in addition to just being very interested in this topic, it has my heart as well. So that's kind of my motivating factors for engaging in this research. So first, I just wanted to share a little bit about how disproportionately climate disasters, natural disasters impact older adults versus the general population. And so here's just a couple of statistics. The Camp Fire, again, up in Butte County, it has the county people over the age of 65 is 18%. Paradise, one of the main towns that was basically decimated in the fire, it was a retirement community, and so its older adult population percentage was a little bit higher than Butte County and a lot of the state at 25.5%. 86 deaths, which if you look at the range, everybody who died in this fire, 77% of the people who died were older adults. And I just compared that with the Tubbs, Nuns, and Atlas fire. This was the fire that happened that took out part of Santa Rosa and such. Again, older adults in that county, 19%. Within that region, lower at 13%, but 40 out of 40 deaths, 28 were over the age of 65. So one of the issues that comes up with this is how do people calculate whether a death is related to the fire or not? And this is a big ongoing conversation to have, because while in Paradise or in the Camp Fire, Only 86 people died on that day directly as a result of the fire. There have been numerous deaths afterwards, from smoke inhalation, from cardiac events, from lung disease, as a direct result of the fire. However, they're not factored into these numbers. And so this just kind of shows a little bit of that. So in Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico in 2017, they had an initial death toll of 64 people. But after giving some time and having really examining it, they increased that to about 3,000 people that died from hurricane-related diseases and health complications. So again, the Camp Fire death toll officially was 86, but we know there are many, many deaths that have happened as a result of the fire after that. And when I talked with the sheriff up there, who was fantastic in this and other crisis situations, it's a dilemma for them too. He's like, it's a sheriff coroner. He's like, when do we stop counting? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? And so this is a struggle that I think all of our local municipalities are struggling with. Older adults tend to be more resilient in disasters, but they also have some vulnerabilities that make them even more susceptible to death. And so here's some of the rationale behind that, or some of the reasons. Evacuation. A quarter of older adults have a car, an ability to drive. So that means 75% have difficulty evacuating. Particularly, this area was a very rural area. Lots of mountainous roads, one way in, one way out roads. And as I mentioned before, a retirement community. Technology access and knowledge about technology, not being able to receive alerts if they don't have smartphones. There are areas of this town, including where the hospital is, that have no cell phone reception. And so people were not receiving alerts. And actually what came out afterwards is that even though people were calling in and reporting the fire, they were told, no, you're fine, stay in place, when in fact the fire was bearing up on them. In talking with several folks that have survived this, part of the trauma is they received notices to evacuate 3 and 4 hours later, after they had already known that their house was gone. And so that kind of perpetuates this trauma. Inadequate shelter services and people having pets. If anybody's volunteered in a Red Cross shelter, they don't always serve older adults as they should. And so it might take a while to get that secondary shelter open. I volunteered in a shelter a couple of years ago when we had the fire up in Tahoe. And I was talking with some older adults that were on the road for 8 hours for what normally is about a 50-minute drive, but they had to be detoured so much. They were told to be prepared at 8 a.m. They got to our shelter at 3 in the morning, being prepared, having to wait. And these were people in a skilled nursing community who had some significant healthcare problems. And then loss of power for folks, oxygen, dialysis, other durable medical equipment, people with electric wheelchairs and electric scooters. Reading through the coroner reports on many of these deaths, it's quite difficult to read, but you just see how detrimental it is to not be able to get out of your house. Other factors: post-disaster health conditions, new issues that are brought on by the disaster, or existing issues that are exacerbated. And then post-disaster trauma and re-traumatization. We once thought these communities were safe. I lived up there for years, and we knew the fire danger was high, but you think a fire is not going to take over a whole town. That can't happen. And in fact, it did. Evacuation trauma, there are some really horrific stories. I'm sure, this is very well publicized. Many people have seen the videos of people driving through fire and the heroics, evacuating a hospital when surgeries are going on, things like that. Relocation is huge too, with adaptation and moving to a new place and not necessarily having everything you need. And then I skip, but very important, limited access to medications and medical care. That's one of the big long-term problems with this fire, is access to medical care. But during the evacuation period and kind of immediate post recovery of this fire, you've got to realize that tens of thousands of people were evacuated. All the surrounding cities were overwhelmed. We had people having to drive 2 hours to get their diabetes, to get their insulin, because the local community just ran out of medication. Some of the personal risk factors: sensory impairment, being able to smell the fire, hear it, see it. Some cognitive impairments. This fire happened in the morning. And so, people just waking up, there's a lot of confusion about what's happening. Impaired mobility, as I mentioned before, a significant number, so at least 15 that I was able to discern from the reports, and as high as 35 had mobility issues with getting out of their houses, their electric wheelchairs not working, lack of social support, and then limited financial resources. This is a picture, of one of our care centers, the Paradise Care Centers, that had 44 residents. And again, Paradise was a retirement community, so we had a lot of skilled nursing communities, a lot of assisted living communities. And the truly heroic thing about this is everybody got evacuated safely that was in a long-term care community, which is remarkable, given how fast this fire was moving. In California, 185,000, more than 185,000 people do live in long-term care. 35% of these long-term care communities are in high-risk areas in terms of high-risk area for natural or climate disasters. Many of us have heard about the horrible event that happened at the Tubbs fire. There was 2 assisted living communities down there and there's been lawsuits going on, so I don't want to presume to know what happened. But what came out was the on-site staff had no disaster plan, no training, couldn't find keys to get the van and get people out. So they basically called family members and saying, "Hey, we're being evacuated. You need to come get your loved one," and the staff left. And so after that, California took a look at it and implemented AB 3098, which is strengthen the disaster plans that all licensed care communities have to go through. I'm going to go back to this picture. This is a picture we took of another care center in Paradise when we were touring around. And it just, to me, it was really heartbreaking. It kind of showed, the fury of what had to happen at that community. Here's another one that we went to. Again, just heartbreaking. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through what this law, AB 3098, does, because I'm on limited time, but it really sets set the standard higher for disaster management planning, evacuations, and being prepared for evacuating from the community care licensing piece and within assisted living and skilled nursing communities. This, again, I'm not going to show. It's part of my larger presentation, but this is a great little snippet that came out on ABC News. Ron Howard has been very involved in this community. He did a whole documentary called Rebuilding Paradise. So if you're interested, you could find that documentary online, or this little snippet here is just through ABC News. You can Google Rebuilding Paradise, but it really shows the power of what happened and the power of healing and rebuilding. Disaster preparedness. So, preparedness is the key, and we all hear that, but it really is true. There's no way that we can plan for every potential scenario of what could potentially happen. And in researching this, what my brain has come around to is we really need to develop our communities better. We really need to focus on community strength, community connection, taking care of each other. Because in situations like this and others, first responders are not going to necessarily be able to get to everybody. Here's a picture. This used to be a Safeway store in the middle of town. And I just like to show this because when we were walking around, it was so interesting. This was a lottery machine that was in the Safeway. And so here you've got, if you look to the right of this picture of the lotto machine, there's these thin lotto tickets that are perfectly fine amidst all this destruction. And so it just kind of shows the precariousness and the fragility, and I guess to some extent resilience of some things. Some of the factors that I'm finding in my studies here, and I do need to say this is a picture of a woman, or picture of a sculpture. One of the women I interviewed, this was the only thing left that she could find in her house. She lost everything else. And this was, I'm guessing, a snake or a dragon that her grandson made for her. And so this is now, she's like, it was just something else my grandkid gave me, but now it's this treasured memory because it's all that's left. And the other picture was our old property where we lived up there for several years. My freesias that I planted about 10 years ago have survived the fire. But anyway, so some of the resilience factors. What I found is the older adults tend to be more resilient than their younger counterparts because they've been through more of life. They've been through this. I interviewed one couple. This was the third time their house had been burned. And so just to hear them talk about how they processed that. And at this point, it was like, we know how to do this. We've done this before. Those that had insurance and financial stability are faring better than those without. Many folks lost their income properties, and that's what they used for retirement, was the income from their rental properties. Those who did not lose their house to the fire in general are struggling more. The people I interviewed whose houses stood are struggling more than those who lost their houses. And that's for a few reasons. One is the guilt, right? The survivor's guilt of, oh my gosh, I'm the only house on my block. The other is they're feeling some shame, both internally and externally. When they go to get assistance, they're kind of met with, well, why are you here? You didn't lose your house. And so there's that kind of community struggle that they're going with in terms of like, who deserves what? Access to services significantly changed. Many doctors have retired or no longer on what they call the Ridge. When I was doing this research, there was one full-time position there, and then a lot of doc in the box, which is good to have. However, folks I was interviewing saying we don't get to see the same doctor twice. We're seeing a new doctor every time we go in. And several of the issues that Dr. Shaw mentioned earlier, it's problematic because for continuity of care. Hospital burned and is not coming back in the foreseeable future, and then shopping. So now you've got this retirement community that they have to drive somewhere else to go shopping, to get anything. Here's some of the quotes. I'll just read a few because I know my time is probably at the end, but here's some of the quotes that I heard from people I was interviewing. My life was built around things that no longer exist. I don't have hope anymore. My fire took everything. Volunteering experiences that folks used to do. The hospitals are gone, so I can't volunteer at the hospital or at the community center. And really the big theme when I talk about, oops, what helped you carry on is we don't have any other choice. What else are you going to do? This was one particularly inspiring person that I interviewed with. I was at their house interviewing him, he and his wife, and he said, well, let me show you how I dealt with it. So he said when they were evacuated, his first trip was down to the dollar store to buy foam core. And he and his wife spent the next several months when they were evacuated redesigning their new house. And so this was the model that they came up with. And it was wonderful. As I was there, they showed me this and he took me around, and we built this because of this, and we built this because of this. And that was a really strong sense of resilience. And he kind of went into action mode. I funneled my sadness into trauma and production mode. Community resilience is another piece because, again, this entire town went down and several parts of other surrounding towns. So the ways of life have changed. There's been impact not only on a community level, but on an individual level. Families and friends are gone, died, they moved. A lot of folks have moved to live with their kids in different states. The memory bound places where I was born, all the houses I've lived in are not there anymore. The schools I went to are not there anymore. So there's things that some of us use for our touchstones to kind of help build our history. Those places are gone. Shopping, dining, meeting, worshiping, celebrating, mourning, medical care, all of these places that help build community are gone and need to be rebuilt. And then a sense of place. That was one of the biggest issues that a lot of people struggled with, is missing the trees, missing the family of deer that would come by. missing the squirrels, the family of squirrels that I would feed every morning. And so there was those kind of environmental sense of place things that people really struggled with. This picture here is just a few of the shots that we took, and I won't spend a whole lot of time. Some of the images, which I'm sure we've all seen. This picture of Madison, I like to highlight because this is a dog who was lost in the fire, left behind in the fire, stayed at their property for a month. And when the owners could come back to their home, they found Madison. Basically, they said it looked like she was there guarding the property. Part of the disaster response is they had people going in, volunteers going in and leaving out water and food for animals. So I'm thinking that kind of helped her. And the story is that they were missing this dog. And so somebody had the bright idea of let's get some clothing from the owner and at least put on the property so that the dog could smell, and then they kept feeding. So that was a really wonderful reunion. Rose Farrell, I put this cross because she died 3 months before her 100th birthday. And it's just heartbreaking. And some other pictures. One of the community healing things is they created a wildlife memorial for all the wildlife that was killed. And then they also have a pet memorial where people have a place now and where they could put tributes to their pets, because there were hundreds and hundreds of pets lost as well. And this is just my final picture, just some of the images of some of the people who perished during the fire. And so that's it. I hope I'm in time. I didn't set my timer. I'm a little,
Yeah,
I'm a little over, Mary.
It's okay. We will I put in the chat box. If anyone has questions for Donna, type it in the chat box, and then we'll circle back to those if we have time. Because I want to make sure we're staying mostly on schedule for our other presenters. But yeah, it's okay. We got time at the end. So we'll be able to kind of circle back. So thank you so much, Donna. That was really, really enlightening presentation. So yes, we will move on to our next presentation. Brandon Luna will be presenting volunteer caregiver and care recipient experiences in Ventura County, findings from a community-based capstone research project. So welcome, Brandon. Oh, there you are.
And I'll share my screen. Let's see. Yes, so we are a Bailey, myself, and Dr. Burkowski were a part of a capstone course last semester where this semester Dr. Burkowski acted as our mentor so that we could publish the data that we had collected from the previous semester. We worked with a volunteer caregiving organization called Caregivers in our local area at CSU-CI in Ventura County. And so these are the results. Yes. So what is volunteer caregiving? It's the volunteer caregiving provides volunteer non-medical services to support independently living seniors. These services include transportation, shopping, household chores, socialization, and respite care. Despite the numerous national volunteer caregiving organizations in the US, little attention has been given to them in academic fields. And instead, there's been a lot of attention focused on family caregiving and paid caregiving, where family caregiving is the informal care by family and friends for recipients, and paid caregiving is the professional care given to recipients. With the predicted labor shortage in paid caregivers, volunteer caregiving represents a viable, low-cost alternative to both public and private caregiving services, which, as of 2017, saved an estimated $470 billion that year. So from previous studies on volunteer caregiving, there have been a lot of noted positive impacts for both the volunteers and the recipients, where volunteers have stated their intrinsic and extrinsic rewards from caregiving, and recipients have stated how they were able to remain independently living for much longer due to the care that they were provided. And so with this in mind, we wanted to understand the value of volunteer caregiving, which assists seniors in Ventura County.
All right, and yeah, so I'm gonna take the reins from Brandon for this slide. So just to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Bukowski, faculty member at Cal State Channel Islands, and was sort of the mentor for this particular research project. So just to give a little bit of background on how this project came to fruition. So the focus of this particular investigation was to evaluate volunteer caregiving in Ventura County specifically. And this was completed through a community partnership between the nonprofit organization in Ventura County called Caregivers and a fall 2022 capstone class at Cal State Channel Islands. I had personally worked with caregivers on a number of projects over the course of the past couple of years during my time at Cal State Channel Islands. And through working with caregivers, the executive director and I wanted to create some projects, or at least sort of investigate some projects wherein students at Cal State Channel Islands can fulfill specific needs of caregivers and more broadly, volunteer caregiving organizations, whether they are based in Southern California or sort of nationally. And so the executive director sort of underscored the fact that for their organization, one of the needs that they had was that they collect a lot of data, a lot of survey data, both from care recipients that they serve and also the volunteer caregivers that participate in the program. But the problem that caregivers has is that they lack the capacity to actually conduct a robust analysis of the data that they are collecting. They don't really have the personnel to translate the surveys into a usable data set. And the few times where they have actually had people who could translate the data into a data set, the person has kind of come from an academic background and thus translated the data into a digital format that caregivers could not use. So I'm not sure who here is familiar with the statistical program SPSS. Some of you may have used it in your own research. Caregivers does not have access to that particular software. They are more akin to using things like Google Suite, the Microsoft Suite. And so when at one point somebody produced an SPSS file, caregivers could not do anything with that data. So for this capstone project, the executive director came to the students and requested that they take the surveys that have been collected over the course of the past several years, translate them into a usable data set, and conduct an analysis where then caregivers can sort of evaluate the services that have been provided and to see what impacts they had both on care recipients and caregivers. So students were given de-identified mail-in survey data for coding and analysis. As far as the care recipients were concerned, there were 394 surveys that they were provided. These were dated between 2008 and 2011, as well as data from the most recent year, 2022. As far as data from volunteer caregivers, we had 47 surveys that the students could analyze. Those were all collected over 2022. Now, of particular note here, and this is where I have to sort of do my, round of applause for the students, is that these surveys had both quantitative and qualitative data, which meant that they had to analyze kind of all of it. And particularly for the 2008 to 2011 data for the care recipients, it was almost all qualitative data. So this was a team of 7 students, but in looking at how many surveys they had, it's over 400 surveys of qualitative data to kind of transcribe or retranscribe into a data set, code, et cetera. So there was a lot there, and they were able to do it over the course of just one semester. So the quantitative data were analyzed using descriptive statistics, while qualitative data were analyzed using thematic content analysis. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brandon and Bailey, who is also on the Zoom call, to present the results of their analysis.
Yes. So from the care recipients from 2008 and 2008 to 2011 and 2022, transportation was the most stated service that seniors had received. However, in 2022, there was a noticeable decline in transportation utilization, while the number of phone calls that people were using increased. And we assume this is because of COVID-19 restrictions and just wanting to get some sort of socialization. And let's see. And so across all the years, the most common concern were financial and physical independence, as these were often associated with feelings of isolation. One quote from a senior was, "I feel blessed to have been able to retain and live in my home and not having to go to a rest home for the elders," showing many seniors don't want to move into supportive living. They want to be able to maintain their independence. A lot of care recipients also expressed a very loving attitude towards caregivers who provided services towards them, many stating that they felt more connected to them than with their family. One senior stated, "I have made a friend with whom I can talk and sometimes reveal some of my problems. I have severe arthritis and pain, and as a result, I'm very depressed. The caregiver is an understanding. She helps so much." So people just sometimes they don't have a connection to their family or don't have anyone to rely on. So these volunteer caregiving services help them feel connected to the community. And an additional program provided by caregivers was a Building Bridges program, which is an intergenerational volunteer caregiving support, where they would have high schoolers come in and help assist seniors with chores and other sorts of indoor and outdoor stuff. The overwhelming response of seniors were that they were greatly appreciative of the students' assistance. One of the seniors wrote, I have not been in touch with young people for so long. It was a great day being with the 5 girls and boys so eager to help. I shall never forget them or the lady who brought them to the most wonderful day of my year. When others grumble about teens, I tell them about that day and the wonderful young people who had not only left my home shining, but left me smiling too. And it also leads into the lighter aspects of intergenerational volunteer caregiving programs, with one senior stating, "It's been fun watching the 16-year-old girls do yard work who do not appear to have done outside work before. They pitch in and learn quickly." And so the running theme of a lot of these volunteer programs is that people just sort of take a lighthearted view on some of the tougher things that they are facing. One senior wrote, "Are you kidding? I'll send you my novel," in response to, "What is the biggest challenge I face as a senior?" So it's just a lot of the problems that seniors have go unnoticed, and a lot of these problems are just basic needs that people want, of socialization and wanting to feel in control of their life. And so with that, we'll move on to the next slide for volunteer caregivers, and I'll let Bailey take this away.
Yeah, so in our volunteer caregiver survey, we noticed that the most common type of assistance provided was assistance with shopping, errands, and other related outings, like getting out to have someone help to get their prescriptions, maybe from like CVS, or maybe they need to go get their dry cleaning. Just these services that we don't really, think about when we think about caregivers and care recipients. So we would like to mention that this data was collected from a single year, and it may not be representative of the overall trends. But as I stated, the most common services were like the shopping and the care recipients displayed immense gratitude and appreciation for like the relationships with their caregivers and for giving them a sense of care and compassion. The bonds that were created between caregivers and care recipients were perceived to be genuine and alleviating those feelings of isolation and loneliness that older adults tend to report. And in response to the question, what was the biggest challenge that caregivers faced as a volunteer? Many volunteers wrote how they wish that they could spend more time with their seniors, but they had other responsibilities and were volunteering, and one of the seniors actually wrote that my schedule, I'm very busy with travel and et cetera. So having, these types of services, like we've stated, have really created a helpful, like it alleviates so much of the burden of, as Brandon stated, these caregivers, care recipients that want to stay maybe in their house and they're not quite ready for assisted living. And this kind of empowers them to stay put where they are. And with that, I'll send it back to Brandon.
Yeah, so the volunteers are very satisfied with their interactions with the seniors, stating that the caregivers program had positively impacted their lives. One interesting note is that seniors were often more satisfied providing assistance than the seniors were in receiving assistance from the volunteers, with about volunteers being 85% satisfied, whereas seniors were about 70% satisfied. As we don't have a lot of quantitative data from over the years, we can only assume as to why this is happening, but it is an interesting note. It also suggests that volunteer caregiving provides a unique avenue for community engagement and is something that should be looked into. Let's see. Another interesting note was that many of the volunteers providing services often were of two groups. They either provided assistance to 1 to 3 people, or they provided assistance to around 30 people. And this difference may have been due to the different services provided by caregivers, where the people providing 1 to 3 services or assisting 1 to 3 people might have been driving more, whereas the people providing to a large number of people may have been doing phone calling services, thereby reaching or assisting more people. And with that, we can move on to the next slide for discussion. So yeah, with the data available, many of the assumptions that caregiver staff had of their seniors and volunteers were confirmed and better made them able to make decisions regarding their two populations in improving their lives. Many of the services provided to seniors assisted in their day-to-day needs, and seniors were extremely grateful for the services they received. Volunteers were very satisfied with their contributions, and as Bailey stated, they wished that many of them wished that they could spend more time with their seniors, but they had prior obligations. Also, another trend that was very impactful was that the written experiences, the qualitative responses by seniors and volunteers were more impactful than the quantitative data, as it provided a unique insight into the lives of both seniors and volunteers.
Yeah.
And with that, we would like to acknowledge Tammy Glenn and Kayleen Kwachek from Caregivers for their assistance with this project. It offered Bailey and I a unique opportunity to engage, although not directly with our, but it allowed us to engage with our community and help us learn more about the, gave us a learning opportunity, a civic engagement option, a referral opportunity in the future should we need an organization like Caregivers for ourselves or seniors that we may know. And it's a very unique experience to be able to see and impact the lives of those around us. From our previous semester, we would like to thank Brandon Amanza, Sydney Duarte, and Emma Graff for their contributions. And if you have any other questions for us, you can contact me at my email down below, which is Brandon Luna, or brandon.luna930@myci.csuci.edu. And that is it.
Hey, so yeah, we have about 2 minutes for questions right now, and then we can also get questions after our other presentations as well. So we have like 1 or 2 questions quickly. If there's anybody that has a good question, comment, anything they want to share.
Yes, Donna?
Oh, sorry, I missed that hand up. Thank you.
Well, I was raising my physical hand while I was trying to find the real hand, the electronic hand. So have you found, and you may have covered this, I'm sorry, I had a household thing I had to take care of. Have you found a change in the participants' perception of aging, older adults, desire to work with older adults?
No, the perceptions are pretty consistent. A lot of the volunteers are seniors themselves, so they're very understanding of the participants. And a few of them recognize that they'll also need caregivers assistance soon as well, because they are noticing their own physical decline and their own impairments becoming more prominent as they age. And then Tara.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm curious to know if the volunteers themselves were consistent. I'm not sure if you mentioned that in the presentation.
We don't know the consistency of their volunteering, but we do have an idea of how many people they were assisting. But we don't know exactly who was consistently doing what. Dr. Burkowski, do you have anything to add?
Oh yeah, as far as the volunteer caregivers, we only had one wave of data from 2022, so we weren't necessarily able to kind of track it over time. But the other thing too is that even if that data were available, due to the constraints with regards to students being made available to de-identify data, we can't track whether somebody was volunteering for, say, multiple years or receiving services for multiple years. So that's actually something that in the future, if we were to kind of redo this analysis or redo this investigation to see if we can, be able to access data and be able to kind of code to track somebody over time.
Great, thank you.
All right, and then we'll do Lorinda quickly, and then, yep. Muted.
Do you know if it's a general policy for caregivers to have them assign consistent clients? So for example, did the volunteers typically go see the same people over and over again? Is there consistency in that way as they make assignments, or are they constantly shuffling and seeing different people?
We assume there is some consistency because one of the services provided by caregivers is a matchmaking service of sort between a volunteer and a senior. So they try to be consistent, but there are some times where someone needs to fill in for another volunteer's role in driving or socialization, or even providing respite care for the senior or the senior's family.
Thank you. That's great.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next presentation. We have Samuel sharing analysis of rural barriers to healthy aging. Thank you.
Hey everyone, let me get this screen share set up for a second. Give me just a minute here. So I am presenting what is essentially can everyone see that? Let's put it in presenting mode. We can all see it. Yes, okay, thumbs up everywhere. Sounds good. So I'll be presenting on analysis of rural barriers to healthy aging, which I produced with the help of Professor Takagi. So let's just jump right into it. So as we know, millions of citizens across California are aging, and the increase in the older adult population is particularly evident in the state's rural areas. So in general, we know that rural communities experience poorer health and more limited access to quality care than urban communities. So there's definitely a disparity gap there. And in rural areas, things like health provider shortages and transportation challenges translate to difficulty in securing regular checkups with primary care providers, preventative services, and basically health maintenance for older adults in these rural areas. So what my study was doing was examining the sociodemographic and health characteristics of people living in the PSA3 area, which, don't worry, I will explain that in the next slide. PSA3 is older adults. So PSA3, I'll go with my study overview. PSA3 is an area in Northern California, and I sourced the information about these counties. It's a set of 5 counties, Glenn, Butte, Shasta, Tehama, and Plumas counties. And I had the opportunity to do some research work with the Department of Aging and SCAN Foundation, helping develop baseline reports on these counties. And so as I was looking at these reports as an intern, I felt myself seeing red flags kind of popping up. And I thought, these are really evident, and I see them connecting to things that we know about health barriers and warning signs for the development of chronic illness. So I thought I would investigate it further. My data was sourced from the PSA3 area plan, which is a comprehensive document that outlines poverty and employment rates, community supports available, population demographics, care provider availability. It's kind of like a general overview of what's going on in these counties. It also included county-based surveys from the area agencies on aging. So you could see, specific quotes from older adults living in the counties talking about what their experience was. So I was looking at what systemic barriers are playing a role in this, in these red flags that I was seeing, and also what is the older adults' perspectives on these barriers, because although they had done interviews, there was not a lot that I saw of qualitative or quantitative research being done to see what are their actual perspectives and how are they overcoming these barriers that we know exist. They just, to me, felt a little ignored. If you want, you can actually find area plans for all of California's counties in the link that I included here. If anybody wants it, I can put it in the chat or whatnot. But it was great to have a wealth of information available about the counties, and it's what inspired my jumping into this investigation. So the older adult population in PSA3, this map on the bottom right here is kind of explaining where PSA3 is. It's in Northern California. As Donna was talking about Butte County and the fires that happened there. Butte is one of the 5 counties in the PSA3 area. They're all pretty closely connected. Some of them are more rural than others, or have more, infrastructure development. But overall, the PSA3 area has a projected increase in its older adult population, particularly those over the age of 85, of up to nearly 280%. So when I started my research, I was looking at this map and I saw these numbers and thought, wow, that's 280, that's close to 300, but that's a huge increase. And although it's from 2010 to 2060, and that's a projected increase, those years will come quickly. That's kind of the next step for our state as it moves into the next 10 and 20 years. So these are things, this is the silver, tidal wave that people have been talking about. And I saw, wow, here it is. And what are we doing about it? Because I see some warning signs. So this data, the chart that I have here, kind of outlines some of this information. Colusa County is the one with the, closest to 280%. It has, percent increase in older adults, 112%, 279. And then Glenn and Butte also have high percentages of increase, and Tehama. Plumas County is kind of unique. It has the opposite effect, but I didn't get too far into that. I was more focused on understanding what was going on for this growing population of older adults in this region and what can we do to help them and figure out what they need. So first thing that I saw in these counties was looking at race and ethnicity. As I broke down their demographic data, I found that Colusa County has a 61.3% Hispanic and Latino population based on the census data from 2021. And then Glenn County has a 44%, Tehama 27.3%. And those are the three counties in PSA 3 with the highest percentages of a Hispanic and Latino population, which I thought was important to focus on, as it kind of highlights the direction that the state as a whole is headed in terms of demographics. We're becoming a more diverse population, and that needs to be taken into account as we're looking to care for our older adults. In part of the empirical research that I was doing, I found studies that stated Hispanic populations bear the highest burden of the obesity epidemic, and then the disparities gap is bigger among Hispanics in rural communities, such as Colusa and Glenn counties. So I saw these, kind of the spider web starting to connect. According to the Rural Health Information Hub, which I'm not sure if any of you have connected with it, but it's a huge resource for me in this research process. They found that the risk factors for the development of type 2 diabetes, which was ultimately part of the focus of my study, included obesity, physical activity, inactivity, poor diet, and older age. So, looking at these words, I felt, like I said, the warning signs, the red flags were starting to pop up. The 2019 study from Tran and others also found that diabetes screening prevalence was lower in rural areas despite their heightened risk factors for diabetes. So I decided to focus my study a little bit on the chronic illness side of these challenges, and particularly type 2 diabetes. And it seemed like there were a lot of warning signs there for these communities, high numbers of Hispanic populations with an increased risk, and less support in the community for these different health challenges. Continuing on, I began looking at socioeconomic status and wanted to understand, how are these older adults affording their care, or what does that look like? And I found more red flags across all 5 counties in PSA 3. People 65 years and older make up 1/4 of the population, 25% on average. And the older adult poverty rates for all the counties within PSA 3 remain at or above the national average. And 1/4 of all older adults in PSA 3 are living in poverty. So I saw these older adults are struggling to afford even basic living. So I'm not sure how they're going to be able to take care of themselves with increases in chronic illness and the risk factors associated. The poverty rates in PSA 3 are highest among women and minorities. Connecting back to my demographics that we saw on the last slide, it seemed like a warning sign. Those who live alone, are not married, struggle to find work, and depend exclusively on Social Security benefits are also among the highest rates of poverty in the area. So analyzing this data, I saw a clear need for investigation of rural adult perspectives as it relates to their management and support of their chronic health conditions. I saw that they were struggling, and it would be important to understand how they were managing, because that was the question I was asking myself as I moved through this research. Like, how could they possibly be sustaining themselves if this is the data that's associated with what's going on there? That chart at the bottom shows the unemployment and poverty rates for older adults by county in PSA 3. So if you just look on the far right, we have the California state average for unemployment and poverty. In all of the counties in PSA 3, the poverty rate for older adults is nearly double or triple, even like in Plumas County, what the state average is. And then unemployment is also high, particularly in Colusa County. So these were things I was looking at and trying to understand better. Continuing on, I began looking at food access because I understood that diabetes was a challenge and that there were risk factors there, but I wanted to see, how can we engage with that and understand it better. So we found that food access was another barrier for those living in PSA 3. 37% of the respondents to the Area Agency on Aging, the AAA surveys, stated that buying food was often a problem. In addition, 37%, probably the same 37% people of survey respondents were over the age of 80 and likely to have difficulty traveling or procuring healthy foods for themselves. So it was clear that these populations of older adults that were not necessarily financially stable and came from a diverse background were having challenges getting these healthy foods. They had the risk factors for some of these chronic disease developments, and limitations in healthy food options are known. They're a known critical barrier to be overcome in order to support the long-term health of an older population in the area. So these were the warning signs that I saw. Finally, I was looking at mental health in the area and saw that the PSA 3 area falls into a high needs geographic health professional shortage area for mental health. There's health professional shortage denotations or descriptions for different types of healthcare provision. In particular, for mental health, PSA 3 is really struggling. In conjunction with that point, 48% of the PSA 3 survey respondents reported feeling isolated or depressed. That was from 2022. And 51% of respondents reported having trouble finding a reliable care provider help if they needed it. So I understood through this research process that they are lacking care providers, and the red flags kind of all came together, and I saw, wow, there's a kind of a wave coming and there's not a whole lot there to support it. And how can we get ahead of this and educate ourselves on what these older adults need and what would best serve them moving into the future, understanding that there will be financial challenges for the counties to produce these supports, the Camp Fire and the other natural disasters in the area further hampering these efforts to try and support their older adults. So that was kind of the result of my study was it was actually a proposal to look at types of research that would best support understanding what these older adults need. An additional note, in the PSA 3 area, only one county, Butte County, has an adult day healthcare facility, just connecting with that lack of providers and support for the older adults. And then together with Plumas County, they're the only two in PSA 3 area to provide a transportation system with comprehensive routes, serving both incorporated and unincorporated areas within the county lines. So transportation is a challenge, care provider access is a challenge, healthy foods are a challenge. So I'll move into my conclusion slide here so we can get to questions. So what I saw were trends in PSA 3. It was a rapid and significant increase in the older adult population, as we saw with that 280% growth in the next 20, 30 years. And then demographic trends towards a more Hispanic and Latino identifying population, more female, more uninsured, generally lower income, living alone, and struggling to find employment population. So these were red flags that I saw, and they also had barriers to food and care provider access as seen through the AAA surveys and community reports. So putting all this together for myself, my analysis concluded that the older adults in the PSA region likely face barriers to healthcare through a number of systemic inequities. And so I was trying to come up with an idea to get an understanding of how we could support these older adults in a way that's really effective in a systemic concept or perspective. So my conclusion was that future research, which we should encourage, and I wrote a proposal for future research, should include qualitative studies using a participatory method, something like photo voice, which is kind of been a newer development in this type of research, in which you provide your participants with cameras and they can take pictures and report on their experience, and you can get kind of a firsthand perspective of what they're dealing with and what their perspective is on it uniquely, which I thought would be really effective for overcoming some of these systemic barriers. If it's a bus stop that you need in a specific area, now I have a picture of this, exactly where this bus stop needs to be and why it's such a challenge, rather than simply a quote from someone or a percentage number saying nobody goes to this bus stop. I have some real tangible evidence to present to counties looking to support their older adults. So this participatory method can expand the understanding of community perspectives on their health challenges, as well as create ideas on how to creatively implement effective systemic improvements for our older adults. My last slide is just my reference page, and I'll open it up for questions that anybody has, or I can go back to previous slides if you'd like. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That was awesome. All right, so questions. Let's see, I think Lorinda. Yes, there we go. Lorinda, unmute.
My clicker is not clicking very effectively. Can you unshare, Samuel, so I can?
Yes, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
okay. All right.
Figure out how to do that.
So,
there we go.
So my question is really about whether or not, so what you are calling for is some identification of proactive and preemptive services and supports that are going to help people stay as well as they possibly can, right? And not be in a state where they need like direct hands-on care, geriatric care, that sort of thing. And my experience has been that there's resistance to that because the money goes where the most severe needs are, right? And so even during the master plan for aging meetings and stuff, the voices like yours weren't heard very well. And so I'm wondering if you can think about doing projective data to help people understand how much money it will save the state if we will do a better job of supplying the services and support people need when they are younger, before they're in that heavier state of need. I think that's the data that's needed to move the needle on where money goes. There needs to be something to show that benefit to the state financially. So I'm just putting that, your research is really inspiring because it's drilling down on things that I really care about and that I've seen talked about, but there's always this piece of missing data, putting a dollar sign on how providing these services are going to benefit the state and the individuals, Anyway, thank you, Samuel, for your study. I appreciate it.
Of course, thank you. I think that's a great point. Our health in our older age is, a product of our habits. And I think that's, part of where that study could start is understanding that, improving our health in our younger years is how we maintain our health in our later years. And I definitely agree. Putting a number sign on things tends to always help with that development of policy. I think that when people are working in government, they love to work with the dollar signs, and that's really what it comes down to for them. So we have to learn to speak their language and show that outside of our data that we put together, there's some tangible benefit to making these changes. So yeah, open to getting involved with anybody that wants to work on that, of course.
Look at using the term social determinants of health instead of choices and lifestyle, because that's one of the reasons why I think it's kind of shunned is they think people have made the choices rather than not had the option for their whole life. Thank you. Sorry.
We have so many hands up. Wonderful. I think it puts them in order. So I'm going to go Tara next.
Hey, Sam, great job. We've gone through this 2-year journey together. It's fantastic. So you listed so many barriers: race, poverty, women are, predominantly women, mental health, uninsured, people living alone or unemployed, lack of access to care providers. In your 30,000 foot view, which of those do you think might be the most important? I know it has to happen together, but which do you think might be the first one to tackle, pending the money and the budget and the data, to help that issue?
I hear you. What my study came down to focus on in terms of chronic illness was the development of diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And for that specifically, I think that food access would be very critical. In a bigger picture view, it might be transportation or actually care provider access ultimately might be the most, critical thing. But for focusing on the diabetes and chronic illness, the food access I felt was the big one. PSA 3 and some of these counties produce food for the entire United States and the rest of the world, and produce some of the best foods. And so I was struggling to understand why people living in those counties that produce those foods, that large Latino population is connected with the workforce that produces those foods very directly, actually. In fact, those population numbers change over the course of the year as crops go into and out of season and production goes into and out of season. So I was in my thinking, I thought, well, there's got to be a way to get the food out of the fields and back onto the plates of the people in those communities. And maybe that's working with the people that are the farmers or the people processing and transporting it. I didn't have the knowledge in that field to be able to make those connections, but I wanted to, and I thought, that's an important part there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Fantastic analysis. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I think we had Teresa.
Teresa, yeah.
Teresa, thank you. I think she was next.
Yes. Thanks so much, Samuel. Mine is more like a comment. I appreciate the fact that you pointed the need to do like an assessment to find out what the older adults themselves really want. I just wanted to let you know in your proposal, I don't know what you have written there, but there's something going on right now, like the Sacramento County Adult and Aging Services. They're actually doing a listening session in some communities. So that's a really good opportunity to use to find out what the older adults themselves want. So doing listening sessions will help, within the community to find out what exactly are the key things. We may list all those things, but when you listen to them, then you get an idea what are some of those things that they prioritize, so that we can prioritize the intervention based on what they are asking. So if you haven't included that, I think listening session is a good one to add. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a good addition. And then Donna.
Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation. I'm a retired nurse. I've worked around the country, including in public health. And what I think you have here is the beginnings of a proposal for federally qualified health centers, a subset of which is rural health. So the federal government already funds rural health centers. And it's my impression from what I've seen in the media that Governor Newsom is very well aware that the rural population in in California, this huge state, is very underserved. So I think you're off to a really good start to formalize the needs in Northern California rural health.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. So that was those some great questions and comments. So we're going to now go on to our last group of or presentation, I should say. And for this one, we have Brandy Jones and Aliyah Patel. I'll let her confirm that. Barriers to accessing end-of-life care services for Native American and rural community members in Northern California.
Hey, hi, everybody. Thank you. I just want to say for Samuel, thank you so much for that great presentation, because you covered a lot that we're not going to cover today in a lot of detail. And that analysis was wonderful. And we found a lot of the same findings for Yolo County. Thank you. And I hope to connect with you after this. But okay, so our project is the Life Transitions Project. It is identifying barriers and solutions for access and utilization of hospice and palliative care services, specifically for Native American and rural communities. So we have, for Native communities, Historically, for our presentations, we've used a land acknowledgement, but we're rethinking using these. While we want to honor the land that we are on as indigenous lands, land acknowledgements have been found to resolve individuals of any deeper inquiry about their accountability and our accountability to these people. So we want to be accountable for allyship in the work we do. So we are pausing land acknowledgement for now. And institutions that use them should also take some action toward rethinking using land acknowledgements. So for educational purposes, I just want you to know that Yolo County is home to 3 of 109 federally recognized tribes in California. Kachel-Dihi Band of Wentun Indians, Quetzal-Dihi Band of Wentun Indians, and Yocha-Dihi Wentun Nation. But there are many indigenous peoples who have no federal recognition today. So some background on our project, Yolo Cares was provided a 3-year grant to identify barriers and solutions to hospice and palliative care services for the population of the Capay Valley. There were 3 phases of the grant: research, development, and implementation. Currently, we are concluding the research phase and producing a report for the public, which we'll share with CCGG. And during the research process, we quickly learned that these 3 phases really overlap because there were immediate barriers that needed to be addressed, that we could address. And one of those was being learning that the language commonly used in hospice and palliative care, such as terms like end of life, it is an absolute statement that we use in Western medicine, and it doesn't align with the beliefs and value systems of Native American communities. So we immediately changed the use of our language, which is why we're called Life Transitions Project and not an end of life care project anymore. Also, another thing that overlapped too was realizing that disparities for these communities, for indigenous communities specifically, are not equal to recognized, federally recognized tribal membership and non-recognized tribal members. So we expanded our research for Native Americans specifically across California. So, so why this work matters? Well, as we all know, there's a growing population of minority and older adults, and the prevalence of advanced life-limiting chronic illness in these specific populations are very, very high for rural and Native Americans. And for hospice specifically, a report in 2018 from NHPCO, they reported 45% of people on hospice or 45% of people died on hospice services. Let me go back. So of eligible members, people that could use hospice services, only 45% died using hospice services. And of that 45%, only 0.04% were Native American. So there's a huge disparity in care in that area. The work matters because there's an increased need for high quality advanced care to meet the varied needs of these populations. Death and dying, as we all know, is universal. However, what exists is like a one size fits all healthcare system and model. And there's a lack of cultural humility that stands in the way for Black and Indigenous populations to use these services. And our goal was to address that through our research for the Capay Valley and Yolo County. So the approach we used was a community-based participatory research model. And for us, that meant active engagement in the community. So the first thing we did was we attended a lot of powwows. We went to speaker sessions for California Native groups. We did some academic research on evidence-based models that worked in the past. And we found actually that a lot of models that worked in the past were provided to tribes, and they worked with, they did the care themselves. So we did a lot of research with the community. Our asset-based community development model is also what we used, because we first looked at what existed in the community rather than looking at the deficits of the community, to learn from the community. And we mobilized an advisory board of Native American. We have a docent on our board. We have rural teachers from the Cape Valley, up in Yolo County, like Esparto. Yeah, I'm
Brandy,
sorry.
the slides aren't advancing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah. Okay, so community-based participatory research is a partnership approach that equitably involves community members, organizational representatives, and academic researchers in all aspects of the research process. And that's what I was talking about with going out to community events, Northern Valley Indian Health Center. We worked with SNAC on certain events too, in the public eye, and like I said, powwows. For asset-based community development, like we looked at what existed in the communities. In Yolo County, there's we noticed also that the 42% of that county is the Latino population. And there's a community service group named RISE. We worked with them, went out to food banks and did activities with them, spoke to their people who attend their social service programs, and learned from people in the rural counties. Also, we worked with our local tribes. We went to elder groups, spoke with elders about what they felt they were missing, or what barriers existed for them in using end-of-life services. We learned a lot from them. So that was focus groups that we used. We held workshops one-on-one. We had about 43 in-person, either focus groups or just one-on-one interviews with people from the community. Also, and then we put out a survey, and that was what we sent out statewide. The survey had about 180 participants, and most of them were Native American, so it was good. And the rest were rural populations. So turn this over to Aaliyah for our results.
All right. Yeah. Hello, everybody. So I'm gonna try to go through this at a good pace, because I feel like with these I kind of ramble. So I'm gonna hold myself accountable here. So some of the results that we kind of came to through this research these were the main kind of barriers, I would say, or challenges that these populations face when it comes to accessing services. And so transportation, what we mean by that, I think that we can understand that, especially for rurally located folks, that it's additionally hard to get to medical centers because of where they're located. So it has been seen that most rural residents, especially when we've been looking in the Cape Valley area, it takes about a 40-minute plus drive to get to a hospital or medical center for care. And even for older adults that need to use these services, they do not feel like they can rely on even ambulances because they're not reliable coming out into the valley. So actually 65% of calls that the fire department gets are emergency response related services, and they're volunteer run fire departments, so they don't have the capacity to be supporting all these calls. And so I think we need to ask, what can we do to address the fact that fire departments are taking these calls rather than ambulatory services? And then also for our Native community members, it's really difficult because IHS clinics are located in really disparate different locations. And so there's no quote unquote like one-stop shop for services. Oftentimes people have to drive 1 hour in one direction to go get like a screening or an x-ray done, and then about an hour and a half in another direction to get dental services or regular preventative medical care. And so transportation is also an issue, especially if you're considering elders in the community. They don't always have like bus access or things like that to get to these appointments in different places. The next one that I can talk about is community awareness and education. So especially for these communities, rural, but also native, a lot of people just don't understand or know all the details of what hospice or palliative care actually entails. And so one of the things that we found in our research is, let me see, I want to get this right, about a combined 64% of people that we polled reported that they knew only a little to none at all about their knowledge of palliative care, in opposition to the other half that knew a good amount about palliative care. And another surprising statistic is of the people that participated, 90% did not have a living will completed, and a good amount did not even know what that was. And so I think that there is a disparity in education and kind of educational efforts. And I think that the difference can be made with kind of the approach that we took, in that we try to go to places where community gathers organically and trying to meet community with where they're at, instead of expecting them to come to us for education or solutions or, service information. And I think that that is why a lot of the times people usually don't start the conversation about hospice and palliative care until it's too late. And so I think that we can do what we can to kind of start that conversation before it's needed. And then another big challenge is language. Like Brandy mentioned earlier, and even interestingly enough, Samuel mentioned in his research proposal and project, is that in these areas, especially like Colusa County, but our surrounding counties, we have a high population of Spanish-speaking people, farm workers, and residents, and especially in the Cape Bay Valley, a strong prevalence of farm workers. And the availability of language access is surprisingly low. So services that are actually tailored to Spanish-speaking individuals are on the whole lower. So that means re-looking at creating new materials like media, flyers, informational brochures, and having them available in community clinics. And then another big disparity is that care isn't always built equally, in the sense that there isn't always bilingual staff in hospitals, clinics, or care providing spaces. So there's an inequity in care versus what's delivered in English versus what can be delivered in Spanish. And then representation. Representation is a big deal because people want to see themselves in the staff that care for them. And they would feel a lot more comfortable having people that can represent their best wishes and needs and cultural needs. Sorry, I'm noticing the time. I'm going to try to keep this going. The most important thing about representation that I would say is that a lot of times there's intentional diversity initiatives that companies or clinics have. But I think that a lot of it is usually limited to low-level managerial positions or clinician positions. But until we take that all the way up to leadership, a lot of it cannot, inequity in care can't change, because a lot of the times administrative roles are the ones that make the decisions, and community of colors often end up ignored or don't have a seat at the table because of that. So I think representation needs to be available at kind of every echelon of, organization. You can switch it to the last slide. There we go. Okay, takeaway for everybody, takeaways. This is kind of the big ones that we put in our report that I can kind of talk a little bit about. And what I'd like to say is, when I'm saying be community minded, I think what I mean to say is that in order to create better channels of care, we need to grow stronger together. And this is a great place to talk about this, because we're all different kind of community resources and organizations. And so by utilizing the power of community as a resource, we can leverage stronger partnerships in order to deliver better care for older adults. And that means that looking for opportunities to collaborate, which could mean like speaking at events like this, having other organizational materials in your clinics, finding ways to just be stronger together. And it can also mean as a clinician, when you see a patient, being able to know local resources in order to refer things to them, like Meals on Wheels or shelters or things like that. And I think that that makes the difference between patient-centered care to person-centered care. And then the last thing I'll say is on competency versus humility. I think that this is a very important point. Cultural competency is a thing that a lot of companies strive to achieve, and it can be a really good starting point, but I think that it should be left as a starting point because often people use these measures to check a box for a grant, or check a box to show that their company is, trying to do that outwardly. But I think what we should strive to achieve is cultural humility, which critically reevaluates on the kind of preconceived notions we all have as people. I think that we have a lot of implicit biases formed just by the natural environment we're in, the media we consume, the people we meet, the things that we believe. And so I think that cultural humility asks us to reconsider and relearn what we know as a journey of self. And that can happen through education, trainings, and the conversations and connections we meaningfully build in community. So I think that it values reciprocity of community relationships. And so organizations should take a critical look at their intentionality when striving to establish better practices of cultural humility in the workplace. So that is it. That is all. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. I was making sure Brandy didn't have anything to say. All right. So any questions, comments on that presentation? Oh, I think Donna.
Hi, I'm totally loving these rural Northern California presentations because you're demonstrating what a different world it is in terms of a highly resourced area versus a not so well resourced area. So thank you, Samuel and Brandy and Aaliyah, for really calling attention to this. My question about this presentation is, as you mentioned, there's 180 recognized tribes throughout the state. When you kind of finish this, are you going to be disseminating it to other hospice organizations, other agencies that serve Indigenous folks throughout the state to just get the word out because you found some very interesting findings that, to me, it kind of is couched in this cultural humility, right? And how we approach and make services accessible and relatable.
So yeah, thank you, Donna. And thank you for underscoring all of that. I definitely think that all of, rural work is super important. So we are, when we have all of this together, I think we're in the last month of wrapping everything up on our end. We do plan to disseminate, and we're hoping to get this out to everyone that we can. So we are planning to send it through our agency of hospices. We are planning, I'm emailing with UC Davis Health right now. I'm trying to get it through all local academic institutions. I think we're also trying to, we're submitting to other conferences. We're really trying everything we can to get the word out. Also with Native organizations, and then also we're going to try to send it out to all the people that participated in our research, so that part of it is we made a report and then we made a community magazine. And that's kind of I've been calling it our love letter to the community, and that'll also be widely available for everybody. And it's a more visual based kind of representation of our research.
Thank you. And then I think I saw Lorenda's hand.
I always have questions. So my first question is, it sounds like that your investigative team, those of you working on this project, none of you were tribally affiliated. Am I incorrect with that? And then because the Native community is recognized as a vulnerable population and they have specific research issues, about permission, I'm wondering in California how that works. Did you have to get approval to be in the community and do researches from maybe one of the tribal boards or councils, or were you able to do that in some other way here?
So no one on the team, which the team was really just Aaliyah and I,
Okay.
is native. And that's the first thing you recognized. And we did try to find some other help from the native community. It just wasn't available in time. But so we also made sure that we weren't making any assumptions, because we do very little about their community. So that's why we did the approach we did, for one, to include them and gather as much information as we can. And a lot of the one-on-one interviews that we did really helped us along to understand like the nuances of their culture and how to present those to the public. And to answer your second question, well, because Yochidi Winton Nation provided us the grant money, the funding, we kind of leveraged that. We started with the tribes to reach out, and as we got support or didn't get resources from them or help from them, we went to we just through our work, we did a lot of like knocking on door, like literally going up to tribes offices and asking them if they would like to help with this research. But from that, we got other people from the community that just wanted to be part of the research too. So, and we just kind of went that way. We didn't get any like real like permission from anybody. So.
That's great. So I went to NAU, Northern Arizona University, and worked on the Resilience Project. So if you're looking for other similar projects that have been, going on for a period of time, there's a Resilience Project in the Flagstaff area for the Native community. And one of the things that they did to address representation at Northern Arizona University, they actually have a special program for nursing and for the health professions, a special way to kind of scaffold Native communities into those professions. Because, for example, many of the cultures, one of the things they don't do is ask questions. They're trained and they're raised as children not to ask questions. So they sit in a classroom getting this complex information, and they've been acculturated into listening to receive information instead of asking and probing. So it's very difficult to achieve academically in that it's kind of a cultural divide. So I'm enrolled in the Micmac Nation. I've been in Native environments a lot. So I just offer myself as a resource as you go forward.
Thank you. And we will contact you as a resource, because one of our suggestions for implementation is for our hospice agency to work with schools to recruit Native American clinicians. And like we're trying to figure out if we want to do, like, if we can, whatever way we can, internships, scholarships, anything we can provide to get that support and build up that representation. So
yeah, please get in touch with me. I mean, I got into gerontology because I was doing elder care within my Native community. And so it'd be great to come full circle as I'm approaching retirement myself to have that as a volunteer project for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so that was a wonderful final presentation today. We've had some really, really good presentations, some really good conversations, and we'll be able to kind of continue those conversations in our informal networking time at the end. But right now, we actually want to do our poll for Best in Showcase. So I think Amiko is going to take it away for that.
Yes, I know it's a hard option decision, but all good. But you have to pick one favorite one for out of the 4 presentations. So Donna is recusing herself, from this polling. So you have 4 choices. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. So as soon as you see it, just click your option and then submit to your poll. Go ahead. And then while you are casting your vote, please pay attention to the chat. Also, Donna just dropped a link to the feedback survey. It's a couple of quick questions about what you thought about this event today. It's a little bit more.
Well, the voting is closed. Get your vote in if you haven't.
Mhm.
One vote could make a difference.
Mm-hmm. I'll wait maybe 15 more seconds. Well, what? 15 more seconds, I guess, and then I was just gonna have to close.
The final countdown.
Yes. Are we ready to close? Everybody cast the vote? I think it's now stalling. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and close. All right. The winner is Samuel. Sam, you got the most votes. Congratulations.
Samuel, I'll reach out to figure out how to get you the prize.
Awesome.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, the vote was pretty close, so I congratulate everybody. I really enjoyed everybody's presentation today. All right, Donna, do you want to just go ahead and wrap up this portion of the event?
Sure. Just a little, this research showcase came out of the pandemic, where we had our conference plan. CCGG typically has an annual conference, which we're hoping to get back to maybe in 2024. But since we had planned for the conference and had everything ready to go before the pandemic hit, we shifted to do these research showcases, and we do them twice a year. We do a spring research showcase and a fall, really for students and educators and professionals to just give us some information. And we found that they're so inspiring and they're so valuable, to have a place to present research in kind of an informal environment where we get to hear what's happening. And so we so appreciate everybody's contributions. There was something in each presentation that I was able to pick up on, and I love this process. We will be having another one in the fall. We don't have that date selected yet, but we will for sure be sending out that information. So if you're listening today and you've got an idea or you've been thinking about something or starting some research, this might be the perfect environment for you to come, and even if it's not totally flushed out yet, you can see it's a pretty safe environment to talk and share. So just encouraging you all to join us in the fall and consider submitting something. So I know that our chair, Maria, had to leave, but we did want to talk to you for just a little bit about what CCG is a little bit, and if you're interested in becoming a member and some things we have going on. So I think, Amiko, I'm going to throw it back to you for that.
Yeah, so I dropped two links, our CCGG website link as well as the membership link. So we have different membership tiers. So for students, it's $5 a year. What you can get is that you can get this continuous emails, notifications about the events. We also welcome your participation in any of the activities we do. And, if you're interested in involving, designing this event like this, or joining a conversation or advocacy work, we are trying to put together. You can be in the loop by becoming a member. And then we will try to provide many different opportunities for you to get connected. Because I know that we are all over the place in the state. It's a big state, and then it's really important to have this opportunities in a space for us to talk to one another and then share information, resources, and then support one another too. So we are hoping that we can be the good vehicle for that networking. So that's what we do. So if you're interested in becoming a member, membership link is in the chat. So please consider joining us. And I'm going to pass it to Alexandra. We have an upcoming event, CCGG Presents, actually early in May.
Hi, everybody. I emailed the flyer. It doesn't like me. It will not let me to post it in the chat. And Miko, I emailed it to you, Mary, I think you, and Donna as well. So if one of you could post that into the chat, I would really appreciate that. We have an upcoming event actually in 2 weeks. So if you didn't get enough of us today, you can come back in 2 weeks and join us for our Elder Justice event. I can share the flyer with everybody, and I can also put the Zoom link in. I am asking everybody to register for the event ahead of time, just so we can have a little idea of who's joining us. We have 3 fantastic speakers and lots of questions that we're very eager to ask them. It'll be a Q&A format. So if there's any questions that you guys are just really dying to know from these great speakers, come prepared and ready to ask, so we can gather all the knowledge from these individuals' brains. And the event will be in 2 weeks, like I said, May 5th on a Friday. We're going to have a Friday event from 9 a.m. to 11. So we hope to see all of you there.
So I'm not able to post this flyer into the Zoom link either, but it'll be on the CCGG website, and
we'll put it on social media and everything as well.
Yeah,
it'll find a way. It'll find a way to you. I promise.
You can take a screenshot right now and you can save the Zoom link.
Yeah, and what hopefully you're all filling out the evaluation, I'll post that link again. One of the questions there is, we would like to know if you have topics that you'd like to learn more about. CCGG is trying to get the word out more, and as we saw today, just the needs of older adults are often neglected. And not only the needs, but the gifts and how vital older adults are to our community, our community's well-being, our community's health, our community's survival. So please, we want to hear from you in terms of what you would like to hear about, learn about. So let us know.
The Zoom link is a registration link, just so everybody knows. So you'll fill out the link, and then you'll fill out the survey, and then you'll get the link.
Yeah, so right now, if you try to click on it, it says you're already in a Zoom meeting, so you can copy and paste it. And then when we're off this Zoom meeting,
so much fun.
You could probably click on the link then.
Right. And like Mary said, we have Instagram and then Facebook. So, you should be able to find us there too. And we'll make sure to post it in the social media too.
And for those of you students or community members, if you want to get more involved with CCGG, I think we've got there's many areas that we could use your assistance, and it's a great group to work with. So let us know also if you're interested in becoming more involved with us.
We have a lot of fun while doing a lot of good.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions that people didn't get a chance to ask about any of the presentations or CCGG, or any comments, any feedback from anyone?
I just want to mention how great it is to have CCGG as an educator. And I don't have any students on today because of things going on at the college, but because California has the no-fly zone and we can't go to any of the national conferences really, or the majority of them, because they're in states where we can't get reimbursed and that sort of thing. This is just it's become such a rich community. And when I was doing research presentations just not too long ago, I graduated in 2016, and it's so hard to get accepted and to get it takes so much energy to get your first opportunity to present like this. And I just so appreciate these young presenters, or not young, but new to gerontology presenters who are getting an opportunity to get their feet wet in a very safe zone. And really, really appreciate all of you for doing that. I encourage you to go to the other level, but this is a good place to get polished.
All right. It's kind of our networking time here. Does anybody have any announcements or anything going on in your world or your areas that might be of interest for the greater good?
Can I just ask if there's a way that we can get like a email list or something for everyone here, so when we do send out our report in our magazine, we could share it with you guys?
Absolutely. Everybody put it in the chat, and then you can save the chat.
We can do that. We can also, Brandy, if you want to put your, or Aaliyah's, if you want to put your email in the chat too, that way we can reach out to you directly. You might also, once you have it done, circle back to us, and we could see if we get something that we could post on our CCGG website and distribute to our membership as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I will remember to save the chat then.
Yeah. I'll do the same.
Great. If you're interested in listening to this again, or if you had to step out or miss something, or if you want to share this with a colleague, a friend, family member, we have recorded it, and we will have this posted on the CCGG website probably in the next week or so. I shouldn't say that, Alexandra. I'm not the one who does it, so I don't want to say how soon, but she's pretty swift. So it should be on the CCGG website, I would say, in the next couple of weeks.
If you send it to me as soon as it wraps it up, I can probably have it in by the end of the day.
There you go. Fantastic. All right. Save chat. Okay, stopping recording.